Hi, I'm Sarah.
And I'm Amy.
We both grew up with dads who drank too much.
So we are both adult children of alcoholics.
And we're here to talk about our experiences using honesty and some pretty dark humour. We'll be chatting to a variety of people affected by alcohol addiction.
Our dads were both called Steve and they're both dead now, which means we can finally have the conversations we've wanted to.
You had to go there already, didn't you?
We've had a lot of experiences between us and we are both really passionate about helping other people.
So let's sit back, relax and join us with Sarah and Amy, Children of Alcoholics podcast.
Today we are speaking to George Billinge. George is the co-founder of Illuminate Tech, a startup consultancy focused on helping to reduce online harms. He first got involved with NACOA last year, attending events, training sessions and speaking on a panel. He wanted to get involved after growing up with an alcoholic father who he and his family eventually cut off after many years of trying to maintain a relationship with him. Hi, George.
Hi.
Hello, George.
Hello.
Nice to have you here and it's lovely to meet you as well.
It's nice to be here in this beautiful living room.
I know, it's stunning, isn't it? It really is.
I'm not
absolutely
moving.
Beautiful. You're not moving.
So George, thank you for coming to speak to us today.
It's great to be here.
So tell us, obviously Sarah and I both have kind of lived experience of dads who were alcoholics.
Mm-hmm.
So welcome to the gang.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit.
Yeah. So I think where to start, I suppose it's hard to pick a point to start at because it's one of those things where you don't know when you notice that your dad is an alcoholic, right? I remember when I was much younger, I looked up to my dad a lot. I really idolized him. He was a very intelligent man. He would read 2 books a week. He would take us to, nature reserves and castles, and he knew a lot about geology and history, and it seemed he could kind of talk to you about kind of every single level of a place you were at, if that makes sense. So he could say, this is how these cliffs formed, and these are the different kind of civilizations who built cities here or castles here, and this is why this castle is ruined, but this one isn't, and this species of butterfly lives here because this particular type of grassland is good for them. But he said all this with quite a kind of like childlike enthusiasm, if that makes sense, which when you're a child, it's just like, as a child, you ask questions about everything. And he always had answers, which was so cool. And yeah, then at some point, I don't know when, I'm a teenager and I'm not bringing friends over to my house because I'm embarrassed. I'm finding, beer cans hidden around the house in various places. Home is just constant shouting matches between him and my mum. We ended up, fighting physically sometimes. I ended up kind of starting going to the gym and trying to get strong and playing rugby. And a lot of that was because I was living in this house with someone who I was quite scared of. And then by the time I was kind of 18, it took a long time for my mum to be able to kind of part ways with him because they were tied together financially, emotionally, I suppose, as well. By the time I was kind of a young man, I suppose, whenever things did get violent, it was very easy for me to overpower him, I guess. Kind of like one time I shoved him to the floor when he was getting up in my face, and I think he broke a rib, or at least claimed to, but he lied a lot, so it's hard to know. And then it's kind of like this ugliness which took over him. I felt that ugliness kind of taking over me as well, because I guess like violence and aggression breeds violence and aggression. Yeah. And so I then spent a lot of my later teenage years and early 20s just trying to run away from that as much as possible, but also feeling a great sense of responsibility for my mum, for my sisters, to try and support them. So it was this constant kind of tension between, I went off on these, we didn't have any money really. So I went off on these big hitchhiking trips. I would like sleeping in service station car parks, or once I slept on the cliffs above the beach in the south of Portugal, and I'd kind of hop between my friends' houses. And it was amazing, but the whole time I was just kind of fleeing from this home situation, I think, and feeling a great amount of guilt. And now looking back on it, I think, would I have had those experiences, which were so formative to me, and I think have shaped so much of who I am, if it weren't for the fact my home situation was so difficult? Probably not, right? So it's one of these things where
it's a twisted sense of irony, isn't it?
Yeah. There's always that push-pull. It's even things like doing this today, or the work that Sarah does or that I do. I'm so proud of it, and I get so much joy and satisfaction and well-being from it. But ultimately it comes from being in a position that you absolutely wouldn't choose to be in. So I guess there's an element of sort of making the best of it, or using that experience for positivity. But now I'm sort of in a even weirder place where I don't think I would change any of it, because I really like me and the things I get to do and the experiences I've had, which, exactly as you've said, probably wouldn't have happened if I hadn't had that experience growing up, if that hadn't been my story. But also the story was really crap. So it's a real push-pull.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I think it, like I just said earlier on, it's this twisted sense of irony, isn't it? Where would I be doing all of this? Would I have met the people I've met? Would I have the same values and the same perspectives that I have now? Open-mindedness, understanding, the empathy that I've developed from it. Probably not, I don't think. I don't know. It's hard to tell, isn't it?
And also the sense of, I feel such a profound sense of gratitude for everything in my life now. I love my life. I love my friends. Like I really love my friends. I think the past year, actually, I've really begun to appreciate how much I deeply care for my friends, and my family and my girlfriend. We were talking earlier, I've just spent 2 months in Berlin with where I'm able to live because I have my own business and I have good friends there. I can travel. All of these things, the smallest things, just feel so kind of deeply incredible to me. Just the fact I can live my life like this and enjoy life. And yesterday evening, I was in the pub with a couple of friends watching Newcastle lose to West Ham, sad. But the whole time I had this thing bubbling away just under the surface. And it was a very normal, 1 pint watching the football with 2 old mates who I used to live with. I was just like, this is awesome. I'm here, living a full life as a grown up, as an adult. And I almost sometimes want to shake my friends and just tell them, isn't it amazing how good life is? How we can live independently and freely and just enjoy each other's company and be kind of full people.
Do you think part of that, your dad sounds quite similar to mine, and, what you were saying about growing up and how engaging he was and how present and things. That was absolutely my story as well.
And mine.
And yours, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And I have a real sadness about the fact that that's not how my dad's life ended. And, the last kind of 25 years of my dad's life were quite lonely, and he was an absolute shell of what he had been. And I do feel a really profound sadness at that loss. I don't really mourn the loss of my dad in a physical sense, or the fact he's not here. And in fact, I find it quite a relief that he isn't. But I think a lot of my sadness and my grief is the fact that last 25 years, that life, that person wasn't there anymore. And he had no joy in his life. And that has made me, like you've said, really appreciate those things. We're lucky for the things that we have. And I know that, people suffer lots of different things and poor mental health. And sometimes you can't be grateful for what you have. But his life was really, really sad. And I don't want to do that. And yes, there are some things in my life that I sometimes find difficult. But ultimately, much like you, I have a profound sense of gratitude for the things that I do have and for the people that I choose to surround myself with. I kind of make conscious choices as to who I do or don't spend time with.
No, I very much do that. I think there's definitely something to be said for the idea that the more kind of pain and hardship you've experienced, the more love and gratitude you can feel in your life potentially.
I'm going
But
to
it is-
caveat. Oh, sorry.
No, go
I was
on.
going to say I was going to caveat that and say that I totally agree with you. And you have this overwhelming sense of love and gratitude when you're suddenly in a stable, comfortable environment that you've longed for. But at the same time, for me, it made me anxious. It made me worried, and I just full of anxiety, thinking, oh, my life seems really calm and stable right now. And what if something happens and suddenly a volcano erupts and just disrupts it all? And that's what kept running through my head. So as soon as I moved out, as soon as we got married, and we're living in my own home, I'm comfortable, I'm settled, I'm not walking on eggshells, and I feel like I can have people over without feeling embarrassed. And then all of a sudden there's this anxiety in me that made me feel, oh, this could stop, or this could end, and it could go back to normal, and this doesn't seem right.
But I still have that.
I have that too. I relate to that so much. I actually just wrote a piece for Nicole where I talk about exactly this, and I talk about the reason I feel so grateful for Nicole is because for many years I think I felt a few things, a need to take on responsibility for other people's problems, coupled with this tension, this desire to kind of flee from situations, and then under all of it, this anxiety that everything could collapse around me at any moment.
Are you the hero child by any chance?
Right.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, me too. We're like a little
we
trio.
are.
We're like Three Musketeers.
And it's hard because I don't think you can do much about that. You just have to accept it and try and kind of lean into the positive aspects of it and recognize the negative aspects of it and try and be kind to yourself and address them as much as you can.
Are you the eldest sibling as well?
I'm the middle sibling.
Middle sibling.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But maybe the gratitude comes from not expecting it to last.
Yeah, I think
As
so.
in,
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
because we do live expecting it to all come crashing down.
Yeah.
And I absolutely do that. It does make you grateful for the days where it doesn't.
Extra anxious.
Yeah, it's like it's not actually a person turns out I'm extra anxious.
Oh, it's going to come
Exo
crashing
anxious.
down.
Because that is always underlying everything. And also I come across as being quite chilled out and quite, stable. I'm definitely the least stable person I know under it all.
I'm the same. I mean, I have kind of this veneer of calm, and I do feel calm most of the time. But at the same time, I quit a good job to set up a business, which was a kind of silly thing to do. But I just have these impulses, and I follow through with them sometimes. And yeah, I don't know.
But would you have done that as in that to me is a positive?
Yeah, I think that's
in
positive.
That you've kind of, what's the worst that can happen?
Yeah,
it does
exactly.
give you that mentality.
Exactly. And I will be able to overcome adversity if I'm faced with adversity, because I have gone through things which are so much harder than this, and I've been faced with so much more insecurity in my life. And one of the reasons I'm so grateful for having really good friends now, which I was just talking about, is if I did find myself, homeless or without any money or anything, I have a good number of people I feel would take me in immediately. And so I'm kind of like, the worst case scenario is I'm sleeping on the sofa of one of my friends or with my girlfriend, or I don't know what it is, but it's definitely not as bad as, sleeping on a park bench in Birmingham because I can't stand being at home anymore.
Yes,
So
you feel like you're more equipped for adversity.
Yeah.
Feel like your nervous system is more adjusted to it and more. I mean, I went through something recently, and I felt a lot more equipped to deal with it and to acknowledge and process it than what I would have done years and years ago in the midst of my dad's addiction. I think we become more aware of our emotions as well.
Yeah.
I think maybe not for some, but certainly for me anyway.
I think something I feel quite a lot at the moment is because my dad is still alive. We cut off contact with him and my mum eventually managed to separate herself from him financially, sell the house we lived in. There was not a lot of money left over after the mortgage was paid off. But she bought this nice cottage. He went off with his money. I wasn't in touch with him much. I was trying to maintain some kind of relationship with him and talk to him, but he kept kind of lying about things, trying to turn me against my mum. I was at uni at the time, kind of doing exams and stuff. And I just thought, this has impacted my GCSEs and A-levels. I don't want it to impact my university exams as well. And just it made me kind of the emotionally intense kid at uni. I didn't want to always have to be the emotionally intense person who, this is going to impact on my relationship with my partner. This is going to impact on my ability to form friendships and my ability to have this kind of light, adventurous, fun attitude at uni that I wanted to have. And it was just so emotionally draining. So yeah, eventually I just said, look, I've tried to maintain a relationship with you. I just can't do this anymore. And then he started getting in touch, asking for money, making up all these stories about things that happened to him. And now he is homeless. I think I know where he is roughly. When I go to the area where I know he is, I'm constantly kind of in this state of fight or flight, thinking, what if I see him? What will I do? But I have this really odd situation where now I've kind of accepted that he is not my responsibility. He has caused a lot of damage to me and my family and other people we love. And I would really love to fully forgive him for that, and I'm willing to, but that doesn't mean I have to take on responsibility for him, because I can't. I don't think I have the capacity to do that and live a decent life at the same time. I wish I did, but I don't think I do. And so now I'm confronted with this situation, which contributes to this anxiety, I think, where either at some point I have to go and try and talk to him, and I have no idea how I would do that. I think he's in a really bad way now. He's just not. Yeah, it's very difficult to have any kind of conversation with him. Or the next thing I hear about him is going to be that he's died, right? And that's this big thing looming kind of in the future. I'm in a really happy long-term relationship now with my girlfriend, who I would like to marry at some point. My dad is alive.
Is this actually a proposal on a podcast?
No, although we were recently on holiday, and there was a lot of suggestion of that, which made me quite anxious, actually. So I should be careful here. But no, I part of me kind of thinks, do I want my girlfriend to meet my dad at some point, who I might want to spend my life with and have kids with? But then at the same time, why? I really wrestle with this idea that kind of, blood is thicker than water, family means something.
There's a huge stigma though, isn't there? We've spoken to so many people that are affected by parents' alcohol addiction or a loved one's addiction. And a few of them have been in exactly your situation. And I think it's one of the most hardest things to do. And I think what makes it even harder listening to your story is that you have memories of your dad, happy memories of your dad, those memories where you would go to castles with him and look at rocks and talk about history. So you have those memories. You had a relationship with a man that you recognized as your dad, and then slowly he became something else. You grieve that identity of that individual. They become somebody you don't recognize, and walking away from them, I think, is one of the most hardest things to do and to put onto your conscience, because you have to do it for you, but also it's to stop enabling them and to hope that you pulling away will give them some kind of reality check or a shock into acknowledging they need help. We did that with my dad, and it took 3 months for him to come crying on the phone back to us saying, I'll do whatever you want us to do. We know that's rare. That happens. And he relapsed after 16 months. But us cutting contact was our last resort. And it's
I think
a tough
it's
thing
such
to do.
a brave thing to do.
It's tough.
Such a brave thing. I'm always in awe of anybody who has the emotional intelligence and capacity to put themselves first, because I definitely didn't. And I think it's an incredibly difficult thing to do, but it is almost definitely the right thing to do in the vast majority of
And unless you've been
situations.
through it, you don't understand it.
Yeah, I mean,
And that's the thing, right? Exactly that is you're also then struggling with the fact that should anyone ask, you essentially have got a parent who you choose not to have contact with who may be experiencing homelessness. And that's a tough thing to tell people. So I guess it's just another secret, and we're so good at holding those secrets, whether it's around addiction or the situation that you're in. That's probably not something that everybody knows.
I think a really difficult aspect of it for me is addiction is obviously enmeshed with mental health problems. They're enmeshed with addiction isn't just about alcohol, right? It's not just about an individual. It's about the environment in which that individual exists.
Yeah.
It's a response to an environment that they can't deal with, whether that's because of their own mental health issues or other things happening in the world. And sometimes, I mean, you can understand why someone might want to make themselves oblivious to the world if they're really struggling to deal with things. As a child, you don't know what your parents are going through because your parents hide so much from you. And I think particularly, I don't know, a certain generation of men who are taught to be stoic and not express themselves at all. And there's all these ideas which are wrapped up in it. And so it's how can you justify kind of cutting yourself off from someone whilst at the same time not blaming them and trying to feel a compassion towards them? Because I think I've been through a lot because of that guy. I don't want to hate him. I don't want to hold any animosity towards him. And yet, holding animosity towards someone makes it a lot easier to detach yourself from them. So that's the hardest thing, I think, for me, trying to maintain a sense of compassion towards him and somehow try and make that fit around the sense that I feel compassion towards him, but it's not my job to help him. I wrote him letters saying, I want to have a relationship with you, but you do have a problem and you need to acknowledge that. Like, I'm not even saying you need to go sober. I'm not saying you need to even do anything. You just need to first acknowledge that you have a problem. He could never do that. He never showed any willingness to do that. And it was impossible to have a meaningful conversation with him because he would just lie about everything all the time, sometimes in such extreme ways that I thought, do you think I'm completely stupid? Just lies which were so obviously deeply untrue. And then you're kind of like, where do I go from here? Because
you still have a relationship with somebody. Like, my dad was brilliant, and then he basically just became somebody. Like, I like to think of my dad as two separate people. That makes it easier for me. There was kind of the dad I had till probably early teens, and then there was just this other guy who essentially sort of was caretaking for, cleaning up afterwards, and generally was causing quite a lot of stress and anxiety and unhappiness and fear and all of those things for a much longer period of time. But I still had a relationship with him, even when I didn't see him, or even now that he's dead. I still have a relationship with that person, and it's still evolving. The relationship I have with my dad, in the kind of weeks and months after he died several years ago, to the relationship I have now has changed. And I'm probably more empathetic, but that's because I've done the work for me. But I still have a relationship that I think of and is still part of me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. I guess it's one of those things where, because for me it's kind of a live situation still. Sometimes I think, did I ever know my dad? Like, I was a kid. He might have been, there are functional alcoholics as well.
Yeah.
Was he And he did love wine and he loved beer and he would drink regularly and go to the pub.
I think most people do that.
Yeah, right.
Do you know, I really
do.
do. I think I know so many people. I had a conversation with somebody recently who said, I enjoy a drink every night and I come home and I have a drink every single night, but I don't have a problem. And I kind of thought, you kind of do. If you're coming home to drink and relax, if that's the only way you can relax by having a drink, then there is a problem there. And it's a slippery slope to a problem, because as soon as you go through something traumatic, your brain is associating that to relaxing.
Yeah.
And this is the thing, it's denial, isn't it? And I think we talk about this a lot. Like there's a lot of addicts, and not even just alcohol, people addicted to alcohol. You've got lots of different addictions that can manifest as a problem and affect the loved ones around them. And you can't help these people unless they want to be helped. And that was the biggest realization for me, was that I could have all the empathy and understanding and compassion in the world for my dad, but I couldn't help him unless he wanted to be helped. Well, how can I help them? And I hate having to say it, but I think you can't unless they want it. And that's the hardest thing. We think when we're growing up in that environment, we can control it. We can do this. We can make them proud, and they might stop drinking because they'll think, "Oh, I'm really proud of Sarah or Amy or George."
No one's ever said that.
No, but you think that as a child, you think, "Oh, if they're proud of me, they'll stop drinking," or you think that you can help them and be the savior, but you can't be. And we become in denial and delusional because we're so
I still
desperate
thought literally
to fix
up
them.
until weeks. Well, no, I mean, I literally thought until I got that phone call, I still thought change was possible. And actually, I think that's the really cruel bit about kind of being the child of somebody in addiction, is that you always just do have that glimmer of hope that the phone might ring and that person might have stopped or might have gone and got help or might have admitted that. I mean, again, my dad never really admitted he had a problem. Even that would have been enough to just feed that little grain of hope.
We lived in hope. I remember my dad being on dialysis in intensive care, and I'm thinking, oh, he'll be all right. He'll be fine. He's not that bad.
Yeah.
He's not really got an alcohol problem. He says he hasn't. He says he can stop on Monday. And that's the hope. And then the rational side of you goes, no, this is a really serious situation. But you do cling to that minuscule of hope that things might get better.
Yeah, I think for me, it was just doing a lot of research into support programs which are out there, how you can, because he's homeless, directing him towards homeless shelters, etc. But the thing is, and I've done some volunteering with a great charity called Haringey Migrant Support Centre, shout out to them, who help particularly kind of vulnerable migrants, and a lot of it is kind of signposting to support services. But something I think it's really important to acknowledge is there's just not enough help out there, and this is too much for families to deal with. It's too much for families to deal with, and it shouldn't be on families to deal with it. There should be more support, I think, from the government, from the state.
Absolutely.
These are people with really complex needs often. They're often neurodivergent or have mental health issues. There's a lot going on there, and a compassionate society would invest in ways to support those people.
The cycle is it's so hard to navigate because, for example, if you go because you're suffering from poor mental health or mental illness, but you're drinking, you can't treat one unless the other one is kind of resolved. But actually, if you're suffering from poor mental health and you're drinking to alleviate that, it's really hard for you to give up drinking because then that exacerbates, those symptoms. Yeah. And I've also volunteered in kind of night shelters and things. And you can't even access a night shelter if you're under the influence of alcohol. But then if you're experiencing homelessness and other associated issues that you're not receiving the help for, I don't blame anybody who turns to alcohol or drugs in that situation.
When people say don't give homeless people money because they'll spend it on alcohol, I'll say, well, so would I if I was having to sleep on the street in December.
But they drink to keep warm.
Yeah.
and I had a conversation with somebody who was homeless when he was 17, and he said exactly that. He said, I drank alcohol to stay warm at night. The stigma and the lack of awareness and the lack of understanding around it, I think, is horrendous. I remember you telling me, actually, Amy, about that story about the shelter you was working at and not serving homeless people food or giving them a place to stay because they're addicted to alcohol. To me, that made me so angry, because I thought, well, people can become physically dependent on it. People can need it literally to survive. Like, my dad was physically dependent on it, and we were told under no circumstances to take it away from him because he would likely have seizures and die. And people don't understand this. They don't realise the severity of physical dependency on alcohol. And I love, like, and I'm really going off on a tangent now, like I love how much awareness there is becoming around sobriety on social media, and there's a lot of influencers advocating, you know, against alcohol addiction, but there is very little spoken about the physical side effects of withdrawing from it. And I personally think a lot of the time we need to have disclaimers on things. We need to teach people around the physical side effects of it, because a lot of people will advocate against it and talk about, you know, I've stopped drinking and I put the drink down and then I was sober. I think, don't say that, because you'll give people that are physically dependent on it might try doing that, and they might enter a whole different world of just withdrawal symptoms. And
social media is hard though, isn't it? Like, it's a shine. Well, no, you are and you aren't. And I'm going to probably go off an even more rogue one. But George, you're almost definitely best placed to answer this than me, because I can barely work a phone. But social media in terms of sobriety is like this shiny, happy place where everybody's life has been demonstrably improved by their decision to give up alcohol, and now they're their best version of themselves and they're fit and they're healthy. And actually, and again, I'm sure there's a whole algorithm thing. Nobody ever reports on the people that are just clinging on by their fingernails and they know it's better for them, but it's really hard. We kind of don't acknowledge how hard it is for people to stop.
Yeah.
Because it must be so hard. And the constant, and it's hard if you haven't been in it to understand just how hard it is.
And it's not just the lack of support that's available. I mean, the only support my dad ever had was when he was sectioned and he was chucked out of the hospital after 24 hours because he wasn't ill enough, right? The NHS don't have the money. It's not really the thing they're set up to deal with. The police obviously don't deal with that kind of thing. And those were the two services which interacted with him. But it's not just the lack of support. It's also the culture that we live in. So you're very, very pushed to drink in all kinds of social situations. Yeah. And it's hard to have social interactions without alcohol. And I think for me, though, a way, I guess, being a child of an alcoholic rather than an alcoholic has impacted me is I do enjoy like a silly, nice glass of wine at a wine bar if I'm in France on holiday. Or as said, I like going to the pub and having a pint with my mates and watching the football. And that's fine. Like, it's fine to drink in moderation, obviously. But there's always this voice in the back of my head saying, is this okay? Do I have a problem? Is this problematic?
Yeah.
And
I totally relate to that.
I deliberately, like, I have apps on my phone now, which will show me how many days I haven't drunk for. I only got this recently, actually, since when I was in Berlin, I probably drank a bit too much. I don't think it was problematic. I think I was kind of having fun.
Yeah.
But I was just kind of like, okay, I need to be conscious of this. I want to take it easy. So I'll go like a week without alcohol very easily. And it's just to kind of make sure I'm very conscious of how much I'm drinking and why I'm drinking. And that when I'm drinking, it's a deliberate act. But it might be the case that if I didn't do that, and if I just approached my relationship with alcohol in a completely mindless way, it might be the case that I still have a healthy relationship with alcohol. I don't know, but I'm never going to be able to feel that relaxed about it, I think, in the way that I have friends who are definitely not alcoholics, enjoy a glass of wine sometimes or a beer, never think about whether or not they're alcoholics. And Yeah, it's just interesting, isn't it, that you're constantly made aware of how alcohol dependent our whole culture is, our attitude towards being
See, I
sociable with other
stopped
people.
entirely because it just kind of removed a problem and a concern from me on a permanent basis. It was kind of easier because, exactly as you said, I was always thinking, am I turning into him? And I definitely wasn't overly moderate, I think is probably how I'd describe it. I was probably always the one who would drink the most or suggest having another bottle, but it was sort of in a fun way, but I never quite knew when to stop. I wouldn't say I had a problem, but I almost definitely had the potential to become problematic. So for me, kind of putting a blanket ban on it was easier.
Yeah, I can't actually drink when I'm sad or anxious or going through anything.
All the time.
Yes, pretty much. So I hardly ever drink. But when I'm happy and I'm, in a good place, I don't mind the odd drink. Or if I'm going out, like, out with friends or out on date nights, my husband, then yeah, I can enjoy a nice drink. But I always stop at a certain point. I don't like losing control, and I don't like when it takes me, when you go past that tipsy point and you're just, you're getting to a point where you think, oh my goodness, there's no returning from this unless there's a hangover involved. But I can't actually drink when I'm sad. Makes me more anxious.
Well, it does say, doesn't it? That's
me.
the point. It's a depressant and it does make people more anxious and all those things. But ultimately, I guess the vast majority of people do have a healthy, in inverted commas, relationship with it. And again, most people don't question it in the way that the three of us would, because they don't have that experience. But it is annoying that you question everything.
Yeah.
As like the child of somebody who's been in addiction.
I question things beyond my relationship with alcohol. That's what I mean.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Am I doing the right thing in my life? Should I love writing?
Everything.
Should I be a novelist? I think it's helpful to have a small business, and the kind of business that I run now, I get to do quite diverse activities, and I get to shape my life quite a lot. So I can kind of choose how I spend my time and where I put my focus and energy. And I think, to be honest, that's the direction I'm trying to take my life in, where I can explore all these questions of like, should I be doing this? Should I be doing that? I want to do something which involves a bit of writing and creativity. I want to do something which involves, I don't know, a bit of public speaking, or, all these things. I'm just constantly uncertain about whether or not I'm doing the right thing or I'm doing life properly. And the truth is, there's that quote, life isn't a question to be answered, it's a reality to be experienced, right? You don't have to do anything in the correct way. It's enough to just try and go through life, enjoy the experience of living.
I'm like that, but I have ADHD, so I'm just impulsive by nature.
I'm not. You're quite like me, George. I think from chatting before this, we're both quite like an element of control over, an agency over our direction and our choices. And completely understandable, again, because if you've experienced not being in control, it makes sense.
Yeah.
I've controlled lots of things, kind of as a teenager, I was very controlling over food, for example. And that's something that I can still dip in and out of at times. I like to be in full control of all the things.
I think that's why I'm nervous about my relationship with alcohol, or I think about it a lot, because like you, I think I'm often the one, I see it as fun, right? I never drink because I'm sad or anxious, really. But I really enjoy I love music. I love live music. I love going out. I love dancing. And obviously in the UK, alcohol is associated with doing that a lot. And I'm often the one who's like, let's have another one. And I do feel nervous about that, I think. And I think part of what I enjoy about that, about being in a club with music and drinking, is that feeling of release from control, from having to be like hands-on over everything. And I do look for other ways of getting that feeling now. Like I really enjoy exercise. I think a lot of like former addicts do as well, because it's something you can lose yourself in. You can kind of switch off your brain, stop thinking about what you have to do tomorrow morning, and just completely lose yourself in like picking up this thing or running up that hill or whatever it is. I'm the same with my work sometimes. Like I like working really hard sometimes because it means I'm completely switched off from having to think about what the right thing to do is every single second, you know. So I think in the back of my mind there is part of me which thinks maybe I will just give up alcohol completely at some point. At the moment I'm in my late 20s living in London, and it just feels like it feels like something I have a healthy relationship
decision.
with.
That's exactly it. It's such a personal decision. There's absolutely no right or wrong. Do you always have that kind of, and not voice in the back of your head, do you still have, like, you are waiting for the phone to ring? Do you have that all the time? I had it all the time. And I had a plan, like, because I'm a control freak. Like I actually had like this whole, like almost like a flow diagram, because I knew what was coming. And this was years before it came, but it was almost like, okay, well the phone rings, and then it was like literally like those yes and no flow charts of how, and you know, I had emails with phone numbers, and I had phone numbers for local hospitals where my dad lived in my phone, and kind of that thing of always just waiting, always having my phone on, knowing it was going to come, but already trying to control what it would look like and what my response would be. I love a plan, because I always feel like if you've got a plan, you kind of know where you're going to go with it, because I don't like.
That's interesting. I don't actually. I always have this thing, when is the phone going to ring? But I think my attitude tends to be, I now trust myself to be able to deal with unexpected adversity in the moment. I really, and again, it's useful in my work, but I really believe that if something comes up and I haven't been expecting it, I will figure out a way through it. So, I mean, my business partner knows about my dad, right? Because he needs to, because at some point, as you say, I might need to disappear off the face of the earth for a week and deal with that. And I kind of feel like it's my responsibility to deal with that when it comes.
But I think it makes us great employees and generally people in a way, because it really allows you to work out what's important and what's not. And we absolutely do have that kind of focus and the ability to, much as, again, I like to have all my plans in my head, if those plans don't come to fruition or they change, I can absolutely adapt and kind of run with what's been thrown. I mean, I don't want to call it a positive, but I'm trying to look for them.
It's not a positive or negative. It just is.
It just is.
And it's one of those things where this happens to have been, I happen to have experienced these things. It happens to have made me this kind of person. Okay, what context is going to work for me? What context am I going to thrive in? It doesn't make us better or worse than anyone. I don't think. It just makes us a particular way. And I think it's really nice that you can find contexts in which you excel and thrive. And I remember really clearly, actually, even when I graduated university, I felt completely hopeless. I went through a period of quite intense depression because I just looked at the future. This is when my dad was kind of newly homeless, and I was out of a long-term relationship. I was unemployed. COVID was this thing which was rearing its head. And I looked at the future and I thought, what the hell can I do? My whole life is insecure. Everything might come collapsing down around me. And just the knowledge that you can go through all of this and then find a job, an environment, a relationship where you're going to be happy, you're going to be content, and you're going to be able to do this thing, which is just experiencing life. That's really powerful, I think. And I really wish I could go back in time to me at 14, at 15 and say, look, you're going to be, in 15 years time, you're going to be really happy. You're going to be like a well-rounded, happy person living a good life, and that is going to be possible.
That's hard at that age when you're living in it, because you've got such limited power as a child or a young person living in that environment, in that you still have to go home, right? You can, I don't know. And you have to work out what works for you. And that changes all the time. But I think when you're younger, you kind of are quite tunnel visioned, like we all are as teenagers, and sort of there's one way to deal with this. But actually, it's that thing of empowering people to say, well, that's going to change. You've got to work out what's best for you at any given day. And some days that might be going home and giving your parent a hug and making sure they're really looked after. Yeah. Other days it might be going home and going straight to your room and not coming out. It might be really shouting at them and blaming them for everything, but ultimately what's going to make you feel better in that time? And that's what I was never very good at, even as an adult. I just sort of maintained this moderate, slightly distant relationship with my dad. I really treated him like a toddler because that was sort of easier. He'd phone up with all these kind of mad, whimsical ideas and, things that you knew were never going to happen. And it was just easier to sort of play the middle ground. And actually, I wish for me that I had been better at advocating for myself rather than keeping the peace.
Yeah, I can definitely empathize with that. But at the same time, it's not something we should have to be good at. Like, we can look back in time and say, I wish I had been better. But you shouldn't have to be good at that. You shouldn't have to feel like you should have been better, because no one should have to go through that in the first place, So
no, you're absolutely right. And you wouldn't. But maybe for me at the time, advocating for myself, or knowing I could advocate for myself, would have been better for me.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Which is why I guess it's important to get the message out there as much as possible that this is a thing lots of people go through, and that there's support there, and that you should be advocating for yourself.
Did you tell anyone when you were, did people know when you were still living at home and at school and things?
I hid it from the vast majority of people. I had, I'd say generally in life, I've never felt that comfortable in big social groups, big groups of friends. As a teenager, I had them. I had this kind of like the boys, in school. But I always felt a bit out of it, I suppose. I've always had a small number of really close friends. And I think it's probably because I didn't want to open up to many people. And I felt that sharing the things I was feeling, the things I was going through with people would make me seem incredibly intense and would push people away. And the fact is, unfortunately, it does sometimes, right? And lots of people will say, I want you to talk to me about this. I want you to be able to be honest with me. But if you're completely honest with all the emotions you go through all the time, and you're speaking to someone who has like a normal, healthy, well-rounded family life, if those are even a thing, it can be a lot, and it can make people think, oh, this person's kind of intense. I don't know if I can deal with that all the time. And, maybe that's fair enough. And eventually I got to this point where now I wear my heart on my sleeve. I open up to people. I don't hide anything. I don't force anything on anyone, but I'm not embarrassed or ashamed of anything.
Which is a real beautiful place to be.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
I think there's there's something really beautiful in being comfortable in vulnerability.
Yeah, and it means that you can say,
I like that.
If I talk to someone about this and they respond well, awesome. If I talk to them about it and they don't respond well, that's fine. You don't need to be really close with everyone. And
sometimes it can raise things for people that they're not ready to look at themselves. I found that as well.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
it could have had that effect, talking to people.
And I mean, I've being kind of frank about it and being able to talk about it in a way which isn't that deep. It's like, oh yeah, Christmas is a bit difficult for me because my dad's an alcoholic and it brings up all these things. I remember at my old workplace, I kind of mentioned it in passing to a couple of people when it came up, and one person said, oh, my dad's an alcoholic, didn't know about Nicola or anything, but had all these really difficult stories about growing up, which we had a chat about after work one day. And they hadn't really spoken about it with anyone before. So yeah, there's a huge number of people out there who deal with things like it. Or a good friend who I used to live with was talking about how her dad always had a kind of slightly conservative attitude towards alcohol in their family home because his dad was an alcoholic. And so even if they haven't experienced it directly, it's such a prevalent thing that it doesn't need to be so heavily stigmatized, because you're probably only 1 or 2 degrees of separation away from someone who does know someone who's struggled with addiction or alcoholism.
It's 1 in 3 loved ones, I believe, and 1 in 5 children. Yeah.
It's
It's
crazy
a lot.
numbers, isn't it?
It's
That
a
does
lot.
make you think maybe we should fully reevaluate our relationship with alcohol.
It's true. Everybody knows somebody who's been affected by addiction,
Mm-hmm.
whatever that is, and in whatever capacity. You know, if we went outside onto the street now, everybody would have a story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because unfortunately, it is a huge problem.
Yeah. And this is where I don't want to go off on a massive tangent, but I'm really interested in, I'm kind of low-key a massive nerd, and at university I was really into kind of political philosophy, and I'm really interested in the fact that addiction is so endemic. What does that say about our society? If it's not just about something unique and internal to an individual, it's a response to the environment which people find themselves in. It's a response to finding yourself in a situation that you don't feel you can deal with without medicating yourself, whether that's with heroin or alcohol or exercise or whatever. Why do we feel this need to medicate ourselves to be able to exist in the world? What does that say about the way we have structured our society, our economy, how we relate to each other socially?
I don't think we've been given or equipped with the toolbox to cope and manage our emotions. I mean, I know lots of people that are only just starting on a journey of self-development and learning about themselves and learning their emotions and what that means and why they're the way they are. And I think, I think as a society, you said it earlier on, we're kind of conditioned to be stoic and not share vulnerabilities and not talk about the difficult times. We're all happy to share all the good stuff that's going on and talk about all of that, but never the bad stuff. And I think there's a stigma attached to being vulnerable, and mental illness and addiction and anything like that. It's almost seen as a weakness, so people don't talk about it. So they find other ways to cope.
And I mean, we definitely live in a world where social bonds have been broken down, where individuals are celebrated, where, you know, it's kind of don't want to be too grandiose, but it feels to me kind of like the dark side of modernity, a path we've been on since, I don't know, you know, the French Revolution and the separation of church and state. I'm not religious, but I do feel there's something we've lost in terms of having a sense of community, having a broad social circle that you can fall back on. My girlfriend's mother's family is a huge family, and they kind of shared the kids around. They kind of raised the kids communally. She has, need to get this right, 3 aunties, 1 uncle. She's so close to her cousins. She's so close to all her aunties. And it's something that I didn't really have in the same way growing up, that huge thing where I could go and stay with my auntie or love my auntie and uncle. But we didn't quite have that same big connection.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for me, I think the root causes of addiction are just the fact that we're also alienated from each other potentially.
Yeah, I would agree with
this
that.
This is a huge question rather than
There's a lot to it, isn't there? A lot of nuances. But I think it takes a village, doesn't it, to raise individuals.
Yeah, and we don't live in villages anymore.
No, we don't.
But it also takes a lot of bravery to be the person to say that something's bothering you, particularly to somebody you know, because then they know that about you, and we're not terribly good at giving away those secrets. So I think that's where, for example, the NACOA helpline or the message boards, because they're anonymous actually, if that's the way that somebody seeks that initial help,
yeah, absolutely.
then absolutely, that's why, you know, Alcoholics Anonymous is anonymous, because actually admitting something is worrying you or is a problem is such a huge thing. As a society, nobody wants to look weak or admit they've got a problem, or traditionally didn't want to. So I think that's why things like the helpline are so important, because it's an anonymous place and you can ask anything you want. Because, you know, I remember just wishing that my dad would hurry up and die. And I'll say that now on a podcast, but I wouldn't have said it while he was alive, or certainly not while I was younger, because it felt like that was a really horrible thing to wish. But I did. And I look back and I absolutely wish I'd had a place where I felt safe enough to just say that to somebody who wouldn't have judged it, who would have sympathized with that and listened, because actually that offloading of it would have made such a huge difference as well. Yeah. Somewhere you could say all of those sort of, you know, really dark things, or I don't like it when they do this, or I'm scared because they do that. But actually, even to ask practical questions, I remember phoning Alcoholics Anonymous, must have been about 14. And it was it's a really sad thing to have done, because I phoned Alcoholics Anonymous to explain to the person on the end of their helpline why my dad wasn't an alcoholic. Because I was he was already becoming really poorly and I was so scared, but I just wanted somebody to tell me, no, you're absolutely, he sounds fine. You've got nothing to worry about. Because I was so scared and I was so sad that I remember phoning and just saying, well, no, he can't be, because, and I feel really bad now, but I was a child, so I shouldn't feel bad at all. But I literally said to this guy, well, you know, he's not an alcoholic because he doesn't get up in the morning and pour vodka on his cornflakes, which was such a horrible stereotype of somebody in addiction. And I was being quite glib about it because I just wanted somebody to say, no, he's got a job. You live in a house. You're reasonably, you know, you're well looked after. Don't worry about it. That's what I want. I just wanted somebody to say, you don't need to worry about anything. And of course, that's not how the conversation went. And that person really kindly explained to me that that's not how addiction works, and that actually only the person experiencing addiction can help themselves. They didn't kind of signpost me to anything else. And maybe I would have used it, maybe I wouldn't, I don't know. But that's what I wanted. I wanted just that anonymity, because I would never have spoken to anybody at school, or certainly none of my friends at the time, because I would have been scared that they would, I mean, I went to an all-girls school and it's brutal anyway, but almost that kind of using it against you, that thing, if you give your darkest secret to somebody, where's it going? Essentially, it's, you know, if you send a picture and someone screenshots it, you've got no control over that. Once you actually let that, open that Pandora's box, I can't put it back in.
Yeah, and I guess it's the beginning of a pathway to being able to talk about it more openly as well, which is really important. I remember I had an interview for Oxford Uni, and the first question they asked me was, at A-levels I got like A star, A, and the first question they asked me was, why didn't you get an A star in this subject? And throughout my A-level examination period, I was constantly having, you know, physical fights with my dad. I remember going into one exam, you know, when you wake up and you just feel like sick with tiredness and anxiety, and you're just like, how can I get through this day? And it was really like that. And so I got asked, why didn't you get an A star in this subject? Was the first question. I just froze, and I felt like an idiot for the rest of the conversation. And look, I don't know what the right answer to that question would have been. But part of me wishes that at that point I felt as kind of comfortable and at peace with everything as I feel now. And I could have just said, like, I have actually really difficult family circumstances at home. And I did my best in this situation that I could. And I would like to talk about the things I'm here to talk about rather than any particular grade, you know. I wish I could have just given that kind of response, but I was still in this time of my life where I was, you know, hiding my dad's alcoholism from everyone. because as you say, everyone views it as a kind of stereotype. I remember we were really struggling for money. My dad was unemployed. My mum was working multiple jobs, and the school offered us a small amount of kind of scholarship money to get school supplies. But it had to be paid into my dad's bank account because he was the one who was, I think it was getting universal credit or something. I was too young to know the details. But I only found out that we had this money after, I think it was paid in 2 installments or something. And I got a letter from school about the second installment. And I said to my dad, what happened to the first installment? And he had obviously just kind of taken the cash out. He had no source of income, but he was always finding money to go into town and get cash out and buy alcohol. And we had no idea where this money was coming from. Some of it, at least, was money which was, meant to help me go on the school trips that otherwise we couldn't afford, or something like that, And yeah, there were things my mum would pay for which she just couldn't afford. I think at one point we were eligible for free school meals, wouldn't get them because that would be admitting we had a big problem.
Okay.
And it's just all these things where, because you can't admit you have a problem, the problem compounds and it becomes so much worse, and you add to your problems. So yeah, I mean, there's no answers there. It's just...
The stigma is rife.
Yeah.
Rare, I'm speechless.
I just think you've under the circumstances, I think what's got me is why didn't you get an A star on your third level? It's really gotten to me.
I thought it was a bit harsh as a question.
A little bit harsh, yeah, true.
I mean, I got to say, in hindsight, I'm so
circumstances-
glad I didn't go to Oxford Uni, because all the stuff that happened to me when I was at uni, I would not have been able to deal with that pressure.
Yeah. But look what you've achieved in the circumstances you were in. I mean, I just think it's amazing, and it comes around full circle to what we were talking about at the very beginning. Is without these experiences, would we be the person we are today? And I don't think we'll ever know the answer to that. But I think this experience, or being a COA, or being that loved one of an addict, there's so many nuances to it. There's so many complexities, and it's different for all of us. And it's just really tough and really, really shit.
There's a quote I really love, and it's either by Miles Davis or Don Cheadle, the actor, when he was playing Miles Davis in the biopic of Miles Davis's life. I don't know if Miles Davis ever actually said it, but he says it takes a long time to learn to play like yourself. And he's talking about like being a jazz musician, obviously. But I think it just applies really well to life. And I feel like I'm just getting to this stage where I'm learning to play like myself, and learning that, as you say, we've been shaped by all these experiences. Are they good? Are they bad? Are these toxic traits? Are they positive attributes that we have? Is this optimism? Is it an inclination towards ridiculous fantasies? Doesn't matter. You just have to try and acknowledge that this is the way you are, that this is the person you've been shaped to be. This is like the toolbox that you have. Some of these tools are really helpful. Some of them are actually really harmful. But as long as you can get familiar with that toolbox, you can start to use it to build like a really beautiful life around you. And I'm probably not at a stage of life where I've figured out how to play like myself. I don't want to take this metaphor too far, but I feel comfortable with the fact that I'm on that journey, and I'm figuring out like what it will look like to be the person that I am, and I'm slowly figuring out like who I am, if that is a thing, or at least how to move through the world in a way that enables me to live a life of like contentment, where I can appreciate my relationships.
I think
it's a nice place to be.
I think that's a beautiful place to end.
It is. Well, from where I'm sitting, George, you are amazing.
Thanks.
And you should be really proud of yourself. And thank you for coming in today.
Thank
you
you,
so
George.
much.
Thank you.
Oh, I love that. Aww.
emotional now.